on YouTube about a minute before I get this TikTok going. So bear with me. It takes about 60 seconds to set up TikTok. We're going to be talking about the second half of our discussion on the 14th Amendment. So TikTok cues up in 3, 2, 1. What up, folks? Once again, it is indeed your boy Tim, the handsome liberal. We're titling this 14th Amendment Part 2 because the first live stream was interrupted. But we were asking, should America toss out the 14th Amendment? So I wanted to come back because I do believe this is worthy of discussion in regards to the 14th Amendment we have this for this country and what folks are trying to accuse the former president, number 45, of doing. Now, as we talked about earlier, many folks are suggesting, as opposed to trying to use the amendment to take Trump off the ballot, that we should allow the voters to decide, which leads to the obvious question that if you're going to allow the voters to decide and you're not going to enforce the amendment, whether or not you think Trump is guilty or not is a different conversation. We will ultimately have that now. But if you do believe he violated the 14th Amendment, should you not enforce it and leave it up to the voters? So that leads to that obvious question. Should we get rid of the 14th Amendment entirely? And as a follow-up, we were asking, do you see the way Americans vote as a flawed system? Now, these two are obviously connected. In regards to the 14th Amendment, why are folks even suggesting this? Because some believe that Trump is guilty of insurrection. Others do not. But some believe Trump is guilty of insurrection, which is in response to what took place on January 6th. And January 6th is a response to many folks suggesting that the election was taken from Trump. So it goes full circle, and it does lead to ask that question, do you see some flaws in the way we vote in this country? If it was up to you, what changes might you make? What changes might you make to the way Americans vote in this country, considering people think that the current system is flawed? That's what we're going to be talking about as a follow-up to today's earlier live. Now, as you may know, we don't block, ban, or censor anyone for their commentary. And of course, the program is and always will remain MAGA friendly. Now, for you folks that are watching on YouTube, I'm going to try to pay closer attention to some of the comments that often comes through on YouTube, because sometimes I'll admit, sometimes I do miss the comments coming on YouTube. You'll notice I'm staring more off the screen because I am focused on what's going on TikTok. Now, make no mistake about it, my TikTok audience is considerably larger than what's going on YouTube. But I do want to pay attention to what's going on YouTube. So as TikTok goes, we'll try to make the program work. So what do you folks think? Get rid of the 14th Amendment? You think it's a waste of time? I had a caller earlier state that the 14th Amendment is downright unconstitutional. Now, that's going to create an obvious issue, which is if the 14th Amendment is unconstitutional, why the hell is it just being brought up now? That amendment came out during the Civil War. That amendment was created because Americans did not want folks who tried to secede from the Union to run for office. So this is nothing new. So why would someone suggest in 2023 that the 14th Amendment is unconstitutional? I don't know where to go with that, but I will toss that by you folks. But in regards to our election, a lot of folks are not a fan of allowing citizens to mail in their votes. Others believe that you should simply show up to vote on the day and cast your ballot. And I've heard folks who want to really compact the hours you get on election day. Now, we're talking a country of 330 million people. I believe well over 150 million are registered to vote. If everyone showed up to vote on election day, getting everybody's vote in and counted, that is a hell of a feat. There is no denying that if you could get everyone's vote in on the same day, that would be a hell of a feat to accomplish. And real quick on TikTok, I think this is Big Rooster Show. Thanks for stopping by the live. Appreciate that. And hey, I enjoy stopping in on others' lives. So if you folks have a live going on, you want to shoot a rag, as they say, I don't mind stepping in on your program, and feel free to tear me a new one. I operate the same on my program as I do on other folks. I believe everyone has a right to speak. I don't have any problem interacting with MAGA, as to some degree I favor interacting with MAGA. So understand, I don't mind coming on other lives. If it's ran without all the unruliness. Now, you know how this live operates. We only take one at a time because we like to pay attention to whoever is in the box. But most lives, you got a half a dozen people at the same time. I try to avoid doing that. On YouTube, I am a nurse, and if I can't vote in 15 minutes, then it would be near impossible to vote on the same day that I work. Marie, that is an excellent point in regard, because we're asking that question, do you feel the voting system in this country is flawed? Many folks believe the mail-in system is trash and should be eradicated. I'll agree with you, Marie, that voting on the same day your employer expects you to work is an obvious hindrance for most employees. I strongly believe that election day should be a holiday. I do believe that. I believe they should give employees the day off, or give them 4 hours or whatever time may be needed in their particular area. I mean, if you live somewhere where you got to drive a significant distance, that's one. But if you give the employees 4 hours off to go vote, look, I understand it's a capitalist country. I know how employers are in this country. They want to squeeze every hour, every minute of the workday out of employees. But to give an employee 4 extra hours per damn year is not going to kill you. I do believe they should make it some type of a federal obligation that employees get a certain amount of time off to vote, and they don't have to stack it on top of something else. But here's the issue. You have an agenda in this country. Now, real quick, in the comments on YouTube, someone suggested that you can't hear me. Can everybody hear me okay on TikTok, rather? Not on YouTube, but on TikTok. I mean, I got a few hundred people in here. Are you guys able to hear me? Because somebody said can't hear you. Yeah, check T Live. It's really a cool live. I've been in T's Live before. We are mutual followers of each other. And I do see folks in the comments agreeing with me. So apparently everybody else on TikTok can hear me. Election day absolutely should be a holiday. Now, what I was going to state is both parties have an agenda when it comes to elections. The liberals do not favor voter ID. My humble opinion is that's bullshit. I believe every American should have an ID to vote. But even if everyone had an ID, that would not excuse some of the agenda issues that make people hard to vote that the Republicans are doing. The liberals don't want everybody to have an ID because they do believe that if you could get immigrants to vote, illegal immigrants for that matter, or people who don't have the right to vote, such as felons and things like that, those votes would go Democrat. We could debate that, but I do believe most folks that are in the country illegally would vote Democrat. Certainly when you see what's happening now where they're busing migrants to other cities, doing some really inhumane shit, when those folks that are currently in this country, particularly the ones that are seeking asylum being bused to all these liberal cities, if they are ever able to achieve citizenship, I can guarantee you they're going to be Democrats for quite a while. Because they're going to remember how Republicans treated them when they tried to get into the country. So, yeah, the liberals want folks coming in this country because they do turn into votes. They absolutely do turn into votes. And the way the Republicans are currently treating them, that's only going to make it worse for the Republican Party. They're going to remember that. But the Republicans, on the other hand, are doing the exact opposite. With the Republican Party, while they're suggesting you have IDs to vote, they're doing things to make it harder to vote. You got an ID, but you may have a very limited amount of time you can go to a polling place to vote. A perfect example is what is happening in a host of liberal cities in Republican states. For you folks on TikTok, I see you saying that the live is glitching. I'm going to reset the live for TikTok users, and we'll try it again. But for you folks and the live is on YouTube as well. So any of you folks understand we do run a simulcast on YouTube. So this live is also on YouTube. So I'm going to reset it on TikTok. And you folks on YouTube, if you will, give me a minute. But what I was going to state real quick while TikTok is resetting, voters in liberal cities that happen to be in Republican states, Houston, Cleveland, Atlanta, liberal cities in Republican states, what they are doing is limiting the polling offices, limiting the hours you can vote. So you notice that when you look at liberal cities in Republican states, they have these long ass lines to vote. That is happening particularly in Cleveland, Atlanta, Houston, where you got folks in line for 8, 9, 10 hours to vote. That is done by design. That's not an accident. That's not something that just happened. When you got areas like Houston where they only got one polling place that serves damn near 1 million people, that's by design. Governor Ron DeSantis of Texas obviously is not interested in hearing liberals voting. So you get laws like, well, if the person is in line for 8, 9, 10 hours and they need a bottle of water, it's a crime to give them one. Why are they doing it? Because they don't want you to stay in line that long. The goal is, if this person has to wait in line too long, maybe they'll leave and not vote at all. Now, you're not going to have an 8-hour line to vote in the Republican area, because Republican voting blocks are in smaller towns. They don't have enough people to have a line that's 8, 9, 10 hours. If you got a line that's 8 hours long, that's going to be a real big city. And it's going to be overwhelmingly Democrat. Top 50 cities, only 9 of them are Republican. So that is done by design. Limit the amount of polling offices, limit
listen, I have a question.
Limit the options. They moved mailboxes, closed down some polling offices on Sunday because a lot of African Americans will leave church, the elderly ones, leave church and go vote right after them. They were clearly doing things. So I'm not taking away what the liberals were doing, trying to get immigrants to vote if they can, trying to let people vote without IDs. But you're not going to have a fair election pretending like only the issues are coming from liberals. Folks on the right are actively doing things to make it harder for people to vote. Anytime you're willing to go out and pass a law that says if you give somebody a bottle of water while waiting in line, that's a crime. Now, the obvious pushback is, well, you may be trying to sway their vote. I'm going to ask this question to my beloved MAGA, folks who vote on the right. How many bottles of water, if you're going to vote for Trump, how many bottles of water would I have to give you to vote for Biden? Is there anybody that believes a bottle of water is going to sway who you would vote for? Maybe I give you a bottle of water and it's got Biden stickers all over it. Is that going to make you switch your vote from Trump? No. There's nobody on earth that believes something like that's going to happen. But the Republicans have used that, not going to use, they have actually used that to pass a law that makes it illegal to give somebody a bottle of water if they're standing in a line to vote, suggesting that that is election interference. It's absolutely not. The goal is to keep you hot, thirsty, and want to get out of that damn line. And as I stated before, You're not standing in line for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours in a Republican area because most of those towns are small and rural. They don't have that problem. That is a uniquely liberal city problem. And all of the folks passing the laws like that are Republican governors. There's cheating on both sides. I just want to point that out. There is literally election interference on both sides. That's all. So when I ask, is our election system flawed? That damn sure is one of the reasons, at least yours truly, I believe the system is flawed. That shouldn't be. There is no excuse in America for someone to be in line for 8 hours trying to cast a ballot. That is inexcusable. That a town like Houston or Cleveland only has 1 or 2 places you can go and vote, and everybody's got to get their vote in on the same damn day. That is inexcusable. That is done by design. And you notice the governor of Texas, Republican, the governor of Ohio, Republican, doesn't seem to have any problem that liberals need to wait 8 hours to vote. All you have to do is open up another polling office or two. Plenty of people are willing to volunteer to work at polling offices. This is an easy problem to alleviate. It's done by design to make it so that you are sick of waiting to vote and you leave. And I see in the comments, Marie says, what about drive-through voting? There's a lot of options that could make this easier. And once again, I'm talking when I say both sides are trying to prohibit voting, the Republicans are against all these options. Like, for instance, they to create additional polling places, you had some of these big cities using sworn posters or whatever. You know, they take an oath so that they'll manage the election fairly or whatever, and then they'll put up a tent. You know, like these churches will put up a tent, and you got to see. They'll put up a tent, and they'll actually have polling equipment under there, so you can drive your car to a different place since all the polling offices and people are in line forever. So you can go there, you still have sworn ballot officials there, and you can cast your ballot there. Republicans passed a law that states that you can only have a polling office in an actual building that has been pre-established. So you can't just pop up a polling place anywhere. No tents, none of that. It has to be a pre-established building that has already been built. That's done by design. If you take an oath and you swear to hold a fair election as a pollster, it doesn't matter if you take my ballot at a polling place, in a tent, or if you even come to my house and take it. You're the one that took the oath to hold a fair election. Why do Republicans would do that? Well, like I stated, same reason why liberals don't want ID. Folks are trying to sway the election by using backdoor methods to either get people to vote that shouldn't or prevent people to vote that should have the right to do so. That whole law against a bottle of water is insane. There is just no legitimate reason to do that other than you want folks that are standing in line to vote to get hot and tired and leave out of the line. Now, mailing in votes, there is a legitimate argument to be made that could allow some fraud. I get it. However, we do a lot in this country by mail. Certainly by internet. You can damn near purchase a home online. In fact, you can. You can transfer $1 million online. But it's not safe to vote. That's where the issue is the notion that voting is somehow at risk when you can do everything else. I'm not a fan of that. I think, once again, the more you limit the ability for people to vote, the more likely people are not going to do it. What you're trying, let's just be clear. Regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, high voter turnout is good for Democrats and bad for Republicans. So the Democrats want to do whatever they can to make sure as many people vote as possible, And the Republicans are trying to do just the opposite because high voter turnout works better for liberals. So there's where most of your interference, most of your rules come from. Utah votes mostly by mail and barely has any fraud. Overwhelmingly Republican too. It's a good point. President Trump, when he was running in 2020, the state of Texas actually sued Pennsylvania because they made changes to how you could vote. They increased the ability to mail in votes. And during that lawsuit imposed by the state of Texas against Pennsylvania, suggesting that their changes were unconstitutional, went against the Supreme Court ruling, all of a sudden the governor of Montana pops up and states, we used the same pandemic-related changes to how you can vote in Montana that Pennsylvania did. And they're not suing us because Trump won here. Trump actually was victorious here. So fact is, I don't know if mail-in votes are anywhere near as fraudulent as many on the right suggest. Now, I do agree it probably leaves more room for fraud than going to a ballot office. But just because something can happen does not mean it did happen. And that's the problem with the 2020 election, is that folks suggesting the election was stolen deemed anything that could happen as if it did happen. Some suggest that the Dominion voting machines could be interfered with. Therefore, they were, without any evidence at all. There's no solid proof that those machines were tampered with. It seems more like there's evidence that they could be tampered with. And that allowed folks to just simply assume, well, if they can, they did. And if they did, it was all liberals that did the cheating. That's why the 2020 election has been so hard to prove, is that you got to show proof. You can't show partial proof, partial assumption. Just because you left your door unlocked and somebody could go in your house doesn't mean they did. And that's where the issue is. Well, the Dominion machines were able to be accessed online, some argue. So that means they were accessed online and Democrats cheated. Well, all of that second part, you're not going to go to court with those assumptions. And that's what has really hurt the 2020 election claim. Same thing with, if you've seen 2,000 Mules, the ballot box shit, the stuff out of the ballot boxes being stuffed. You see video, top-down video of people showing up to the ballot boxes. It looks suspicious. But because you can't see what's on the ballot, you can't make that assumption that they're cheating and doing it for Democrats. There's no way to prove that. I can show you going back and forth to a mailbox 10 times at 3 a.m. That looks suspicious as hell. Take it to court, the first thing the other side is going to say, well, how do we know a Republican didn't pay you to go back and forth? Everything after that is going to be an assumption. Well, it's a Democratic area. It's more likely to be a Democrat because we're in Atlanta or we're in Phoenix or we're in Milwaukee. But that's an assumption that if you see cheating in a Democratic area, it's more likely to be a Democrat. You can't make that conclusion. And that's all that has been done with the 2020 election. I don't think there's any claim of fraud that is definitive. All of it has an exception on it somewhere. Even with the Ruby Freeman, we've seen her passing a USB drive. Okay, well, what's on the drive? I don't know, but it looks suspicious. Okay, but if you don't know what's on the drive, you can't go with that. That has been what's going. We've seen polling places refusing to let us stand within 6 feet. That means they're likely to be hiding something. Then what are they hiding? I don't know, but because they won't let me see, it means they're hiding efforts to cheat for the Democrats. All of that is an assumption. All of that, they're telling you got to stay 25 feet away. You don't like it, you want to stand 6 feet away so you can see what's going on. Because they don't let you stand 25 feet away, all of the claims are based on assumptions. They won't let me in closer. That means they're cheating, and that means they're cheating for the Democratic Party. That's all an assumption. I've watched 2,000 Mules a half dozen times. Every single claim has partial assumption attached to it. Even at the end of the movie, when it states how many ballots were allegedly cast fraudulently and how many ballots mean they went to Biden and they cheated Trump out of, they had no evidence that that actually happened. We just assumed we saw this many claims of fraud, thereby all of that would have went to Trump. How do you know? We just assumed it. All of that is why even the Republican supermajority on the Supreme Court decided we can't even hear this. Not even hear his case. Because it's going to be loaded with assumptions that the other side is easily going to just simply say, prove it. Prove it. If that happened, if you think Ruby Freeman was cheating, prove it. If you think they closed the windows of polling offices and then started cheating inside, prove they were cheating inside. Yeah, they boarded up a window of a polling office. Okay, that looks suspicious. But prove they were switching votes on the inside. They can't. And over again, every single claim that's been made is getting dismissed because the proof is missing. It's all based on allegations. Not to say the allegation should not be correct, but I'm saying without proof, you don't know. You can't just say something because it looks suspicious. I saw you walking down the street or walking in the alley past my garage. I had left the door up. When I went to work in the morning, I noticed all my tools were gone. You stole them. You left your door up, that's a fact. You saw me walking by at 3 a.m., that's a fact. But you gotta assume that I went in and took the tools. That ain't gonna work in court. That is not gonna work in court without some kind of video evidence or a confession. And that is the entire case of the stolen 2020 election. It just is ripe, loaded with assumptions. It's loaded with them. Looking in the comments and we're only on YouTube right now because TikTok is glitching. I'm obviously out somewhere. I think T-Mobile on my smartphone. You guys are on a tablet, but on my smartphone, they've throttled it. So I'll continue it from Wi-Fi when I get home. But looking in the comments here on YouTube, hit that like button, folks. On YouTube, I do appreciate the likes, by the way, but I don't think they work the same as they do on TikTok. On TikTok, when you're hitting the likes, it's actually sending my live out to more people who have similar interests. My lives are mostly MAGA based, so it brings more MAGA into the fray. But on YouTube, I don't know how the hell they do it. I'm just starting to do lives on YouTube, so clearly you see the numbers on here. I might have 10 people in here, 15 people, whereas on TikTok I've had as many as 2,000. I mean, it's not even a fraction of the same. But looking in the comments, Maria, I should say Texas took away drive-through voting. And that's what I'm talking about. In regards to her suggesting drive-through voting, anytime you hear someone making it easier to vote, which could increase the possibility of doing something fraudulent, it's likely to be a Democrat. Democrats are more likely to make it easier to vote. And I'm willing to admit the easier you make voting, the higher the possibility, statistically, somebody could cheat. Republicans, on the other hand, anytime you hear someone making it harder to vote, it's generally Republicans. Now, making it more difficult to vote reduces the chance of fraud. But the alternative negative is now you make it so that somebody who legally could vote may have their vote tossed out. That's the difference, is Republicans make it harder to vote, Democrats make it easier to vote. Both have pros and cons. Anytime you hear somebody trying to pass a law to make it easier to vote, it's a Democratic politician. Anytime you hear somebody passing a law to make it harder to vote, adding a hurdle, signature match, IDs, closing polling offices, moving mailboxes, trying to ban mail-in votes altogether, it's going to be a Republican. Republicans want it to be harder to vote. And the reason is simple. Higher voter turnout works better for Democrats. Lower voter turnout works better for Republicans. Both sides have an agenda in the election. They don't want to admit it. They only want to target what the other side is doing, but both sides have an agenda. What say you folks? Looking in the comments, running a YouTube only is a little bit more challenging, like I said, because there's so few people, but I can't control what TikTok is doing. But looking in the comments, and what did I say? Red districts in blue cities. Yeah, a red district in a blue city. Yeah, but if you're in a blue city, they're not making it hard to vote, even if you're in a red district of a blue city. I mean, if you live on a wealthier side of Houston or a wealthier side of Chicago, you're not going to be in line 8 hours to vote. If you're in line 8 hours waiting to vote, you're in a Republican state. That is guaranteed to happen. The governor of a blue state is going to do everything they can to make sure voters are not in line for 8 hours. That will only happen in a state that has a red governor. And it will only happen in an area that has a high Democratic base, meaning a blue city in a red state. That is the only place that will happen. It will not happen anywhere else. You will be in a big city that is primarily Democrat, and the governor of that state, whichever state it is, will be a Republican. That is the only way that will happen, because it's done by design. Any Democratic governor is going to do everything they can to make sure nobody's in line waiting 8 hours to vote. Because like I said, those are Democratic votes in that line. It's the Republicans that don't even give a shit if they vote at all, because the more of them that get out of the line, the less Democrats vote altogether. I mean, it's done by design. Looking in the comments, thanks, Marie. I'm a YouTuber and TikToker. I do more YouTube though. Yeah, I do a combination of both. Now, a lot of you folks probably watch my Uber videos, which I'm kind of just finishing up now. Ain't no surge going on, so fuck them. Surge is not there. I can talk to you guys real because this is mostly a Uber audience, but I'm trying to separate the channels. I know some drivers are not interested in hearing politics, and a lot of my political audience is not interested in hearing shit about Uber. And I do have a second channel. I've tried to get people to go over there and subscribe to that channel. It hasn't worked very well. I tried to get folks in the Uber videos to do it, but theoretically, I would like to separate the Uber content from the political content, just because the audiences are not interested. One audience is not interested in the other, and vice versa. But until then, we kind of have it all coming out of one. I think you have to have like 1,000 YouTube subscribers or something like that for the other channel to allow you to do lives and shit like that. So it is what it is. Looking in the comments, Big Rooster, love the name Big Rooster Show, says, yes, I'm interested in your Uber videos. I drive Uber and Lyft, been doing it for years. Then you must be pissed the fuck off. I've been driving off and on myself since 2014. I said in a lot of the videos. Now, my story is I started doing Uber videos, not to be negative, not to go off all the damn time, but I stopped driving because, like I said, I drive in between jobs. I got a good paying job that didn't allow me to really drive on the side. I was an over the road driver. I wasn't in town enough to do Uber videos. or do Uber, to drive for Uber or Lyft. So I was out of the game for about 2 years. When I came back and stopped driving over the road and started driving again, I was like, fuck, what happened to the money? I'm doing the same shit and I'm earning a fraction of what I did. So my purpose of doing an Uber channel was to simply figure out, am I doing something wrong? Is everybody else, are you guys not seeing that the pay has dropped so fucking much? And the videos picked up because so many other people were, yeah, it's happening here too. All of these other markets were, that shit ain't nothing unique to you. We all going through it. I didn't know that. I thought maybe I'm in the wrong area. I'm driving during the wrong times. Maybe I'm in the wrong fucking car. I didn't know what the hell was going on because you used to be able to make really good money in ride sharing. Now I would dare say, you could probably make more money flipping burgers in a lot of markets. I would certainly say that in a lot of markets, you can make more money flipping burgers. And when you factor in all of the other benefits that orbit a W-2 job that are not included in a 1099 position, you got to attach finances to that stuff. If your job gives you bullshit benefits, they are benefits. I mean, if you go out in the street and get ran over by a car or something like that, that's going to save you a ton of money. You don't have that with ride sharing. That stuff has to have $1 of value attached to it. Unemployment insurance, Social Security. I mean, there's all kinds of shit attached to even a burger flipping job. If you attribute numbers to all of that, you make more money probably flipping burgers than you do in ride sharing. And that's the lowest of low jobs you can get your hands on. You start climbing up a little bit, maybe working in a factory or doing some other kind of shit, and yeah, you definitely make more. They've really just drained all of the rewards out of ride sharing. The folks that are doing ride sharing full time now, a chunk of them are simply driving out of desperation. I mean, like myself, I only drive streak bonuses, surge pricing, earnings guarantee that's significant. And not only would I not drive if they're not offering at least $2.50, $3 in surge, that fucking pickup got to be really fucking close. Like 3 miles max. I'm not driving more than 3 miles to pick you up. Now, if it's $10 surge, talking about New Year's Eve, some really rare shit, then yeah, you can drive a little bit further. But driving 7-8 miles to pick somebody up, that ain't happening over here. It ain't worth it. I mean, and I'm in a market where I still don't get told where the person is going. Lyft does, Uber does not. Now, a lot of that's related to how many trips you take and how you climb up in ranks, become a diamond and all this other bullshit, which in my opinion, you shouldn't, if you're an independent contractor, you're your own boss, you shouldn't have to earn the right to know where a passenger is going. That should be part of the deal from day one. From the moment somebody requests you, you should know where they're going. You shouldn't have to earn that. And I've said this because it equates to really bad customer service, is that I kick a lot of people out of the vehicle, folks. I kick a lot of people out. Anybody that wants to go to neighboring towns, shit like that, once I get in the vehicle, you got to go 20 miles away. I mean, if I knew where everybody was going, I wouldn't take those trips. But because they hide the destination, all of them folks, I waste money. You know, I'm only driving a mile or two to go pick them up anyway, but it's still a wasted mile or two. May sit out in front of their house for 2 or 3 minutes. I sat out in front of a lady's home one time, 5 minutes, did not realize she was having her kids bring her bags out, and behind my vehicle was a whole bunch of fucking luggage. I looked at that. Where are you going? You ain't going there in this car. So I drive off and she got all this luggage shit all out by the road. If I had knew where she was going, that wouldn't have happened. So that's bad customer service. Not telling the driver where passengers are going, that's bad customer service. And I've had to leave a lot of people like that. Unfortunately, some of them don't want to get out of your car. And that can turn into violence. Now, I'm just finishing up a trip couple, maybe 20, 30 minutes before I picked you guys up. So this is what I keep under my thigh. I can tell you this on YouTube because they're not gonna ban it because it's live. But this is now I tell you to keep a firearm in your shit too. But this stays right under my thigh. I also have on my door mace. You know, in my videos I tell you mace, something to slice or poke with, up to and including the firearm if you're comfortable. I see somebody click fucking like on that. I'm telling you, that's what you should have. I saw the like go up. Somebody liked that shit. But yeah, you shouldn't drive unless you're armed. You really shouldn't. I don't think you should drive at all in ride sharing unless you're armed. Very least, I'll say it again, mace, because you're not going to get in a lot of legal trouble if somebody's fucking with you and you mace them, because it doesn't really injure them permanently. But like I said, like I always say, some motherfuckers need a little bit more than a temporary injury. Something to slice or poke with, up to and including the firearm. You never know. You may have 3 or 4 bad passengers in your vehicle. You just don't know. So I highly suggest carrying something on you. And certainly, if you're going to be kicking folks out, which I often do, because they want to go places that I don't take them. In fact, one of the videos I just made is I don't do airport trips. Because airports serve a large geographical area. You don't know where the fuck somebody's going when they get in your car from there. If you live in a market where they don't tell you the destination, an airport trip could be anywhere. If, let's say, for instance, you work in Dallas. That airport serves Fort Worth and it serves Dallas, Arlington, a variety of cities. You live in LA. The airport in Los Angeles, you could be going from Burbank down to Oceanside. It serves a large area. It might be going up to Bakersfield somewhere. You don't know where that person's going. And you may have to drive back with nobody in the car. LA's a unique area because there's trips everywhere. But a lot of towns are not like that. I mean, there's a lot of towns that are not like that. I mentioned Dallas, Fort Worth, for instance. If you live in Dallas and you take somebody to Fort Worth, chances are you're not going to get a trip back to Dallas immediately. And there's a lot of places like that where the airport serves, most major cities, the airport serves about 5 different counties. The airport usually serves, if you could put the airport in the middle, you could probably draw a circle of a radius with about 100 miles. And if you're getting more smaller towns, more rural towns, it gets worse because there's only one big airport around. That's why I don't fuck with airports, because simply put, I don't know where that person is going. And in rideshare, because of what they've done to the rates, one thing is apparent. The longer the trip, the less profitable it is. I avoid long trips like the plague. Unless, like I stated earlier, it's a huge surge to it. But long trips are not profitable in ride sharing. I just, I'd rather be in some type of, rather be in some type of streak bonus or something like that and take a bunch of short trips. Like for you folks who may engage in, what is it called? Yeah, streak bonus. Do 3 trips will give you $15. Your profit is the streak. It ain't the fucking trip. So if they're going to give me an additional $5 for each trip, 3 trips for $15, that $5 is your profit. The trip may only pay you $2.50. Maybe if you drive somebody a long distance, you may get $8. I want the $5, and I want that trip to be as little as possible. Because that's my target, is the $5, not the damn trip. I want that trip to be 1 block if I can. So with virtually any incentive or bonus that comes from Uber or Lyft, the money is in the bonus. It ain't in the trip. So I'm just saying that's at least in my market. In my market, I want everything I do during the bonus period to be short as possible. With the exception of like New Year's where people getting 15 times surge and shit like that. Yeah, then you want to do long trips. But that is exceptionally rare. Certainly right now, in this day and age, surge pricing is getting smaller, rare. There are markets that never see it. There are markets that virtually never see a surge at all. If you live in a smaller market that doesn't have a big rush hour traffic jam, there's no surge there at all. Boise, Idaho somewhere, you may never see a surge at all. Spokane, Washington, or some shit like that. There may not be any, well, Spokane's maybe, but there may not be any surge. I would say in the large variety of Uber and Lyft markets, there's no surge pricing at all. I don't see how you folks, and I know some of you folks do, I don't see how you drive full time at base fare. I mean, other than, you got these Ukrainians that have come over here as immigrants, particularly a lot of folks are coming across the southern border. Yeah, if you used to making 10 cents a fucking hour and you can drive ride sharing and make $2 an hour, yeah, I can see them doing it. But a regular American that can get an actual job, fuck that. Maybe if I got a rap sheet that's got a whole bunch of brand new murders on it, actually, you shouldn't be to drive for ride sharing either if you're a felon, but we know how that sometimes works. Otherwise, if I'm not in a serious case of desperation, yeah, I don't see how you would drive for ride sharing full time. I don't see any incentive to do it. But we know there's a lot of drivers that drive full time. I don't know how it is. Now, I was watching the rideshare guy, another one of the content creator channels. You folks obviously know Sergio and the other guy on there. And they did a survey, and according to their survey, when they got a channel that's 3-4 times the size of mine, so they got a lot of viewers. Apparently, a large portion of the drivers state that they do drive full time. I don't see it. I just don't see. When I got into it in 2014, it was the bomb to drive full time. $2.20 a mile, shit, all day long. But 72 cents a mile, no. It's way different. I don't see how people do it, but for you guys that are doing it, look at in the comments. Big Rooster says, Uber called me and I asked why I don't. Oh, they called you and asked you this shit? Uber called me. What does it say? I want to look at that again. God damn, the comment disappeared. Uber called me and asked why I don't drive as much as I used to. I asked them, why don't you guys pay like you used to? Funny, my guess is they knew what the response is. Like I stated, I got out of rideshare when I was an over-the-road driver for a couple years. When I first got back on, they did the same to me. I got a phone call. I've gotten phone calls around July 4th. Are you going to drive this week? They already expect everybody they talk to potentially bitch about the pay. There is no one that works for Uber or Lyft in those administrative offices that is not familiar with the fact that drivers are incredibly unhappy with the pay. I mean, the decreases, the motion in pay is astounding. I don't know if there are many other jobs in America, up to and including even independent contractor jobs, where the pay has went down comparable to what it has in ride sharing. I mean, you're talking about drivers making 50, 60, 70% less than they used to 6-7 years ago. I don't know any industry that has seen earnings decrease by that much. And it's for the obvious reason. It's not due to the market. It's not due to Biden's inflation. It's not due to gas prices. It's an artificial cause because you're working for companies that are taking all your damn money. I don't think there's any other business anywhere that has seen that type of a decrease in less than 10 years. And for the most part, less than 10 years, those rates have done that. But when you notice what Uber stock is doing, a lot of happy investors, that's where your money is going. That's where your money. Tim, brother, I used to make over 2 G's a week driving comments. All right, 5 to 6 hours a day. Wow, $2,000 a week, 5 to 6 hours of driving. Now that's fucking fantastic. I used to make a couple $1,000s a week as well. I don't know if I drove. Yeah, probably something similar. Yeah, it was very common to drive a passenger a few miles and get out of the car and notice you made $20. Now, even back then, they wasn't tipping worth shit. But the pay was so fucking large, you didn't give it them. If I drive you 5 miles and I make $20, I don't care if you tip or not. I made a lot of money. Now, that same trip is paying about $4, $4 to $6. Yeah, I need your fucking tip. And the tipping has not increased at all to take up the slack for the decrease in pay. It hasn't increased at all. And the whole issue with tipping, I've driven cabs, by the way, too. I used to drive a cab back in 2013 or something, and deliberately stopped driving a cab because Uber was paying so much. Uber is the reason passengers do not tip. Flat out, Uber itself is the reason passengers do not tip. Because in the taxi business, everybody tipped. If you rode in taxis in the 80s and the 90s, everybody tipped. Uber came along the scene and told passengers, the driver is not expecting a tip and you don't have to do it. And here's the kicker, that it went even further. Really some straight up bullshit. They were telling passengers the tip is in the fare. I got into a fucking argument with a passenger. After the rates had decreased, when I came back to the business, 2019 or so, took a passenger home, 3-4 miles, paid like $8, which is great now because the pay has went down even further. It was like 4 miles, I got paid like $8 or some shit like that. And I told, because me and the pastor was like, yeah, the tip is in the fare. And him and his friend are debating back and forth with yours truly. It's a debate, but it's getting close to a fucking argument because I'm getting pissed. They're making it sound like I'm making a whole bunch of money. When he got out of the car, I turned my phone to him and I said, you tell me where the fuck is a tip in this? $8. I just took you 4 miles. We were in the car for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. You tell me how much of this $8 is a tip. And he didn't laugh or take it. He actually, man, I didn't realize that. He actually called his wife out and told her to bring out a few bucks and he tipped me. But they were being told back then the tip is in the fare. I think most passengers now know that's not true. So they were being told the tip is not in the fare. They were being told the driver doesn't expect a tip and you don't have to worry about giving them a tip at all. And you even had drivers back then that were actually afraid to take tips. That was the mindset of drivers back in 2014. For any of you folks that are veteran drivers out there, back me up in the comments if you drove back in them days. Drivers were actually afraid to take tips. Look, I'm from the south side of Chicago. I don't give a fuck if I'm not supposed to take a tip. I'm taking that shit. I didn't turn down a tip from day one. And I'll tell you, I also had that in my mind. Like, am I supposed to take this? I didn't feel comfortable taking it, but that's fucking money. I'm going to uncomfortably take your money all day long. I just like, damn, I don't know if I don't know if this person's going to tell Uber or not, but my first passenger, this blonde chick, I think she was trying to hit this, whatever. She gave me $60. Now, obviously, $60 tips is exceptionally rare, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is I think most of us that engage in ride sharing remember the first maybe 1 or 2 days you drove because it was designed to hook you. It was so fucking lucrative. That's by design, folks, by the way. That is by design. The company hooks you by making you think you're going to get a windfall. Most folks that get into ride sharing, that first day, week, month, it's like fucking drugs. It's like what you hear people say about, and I've never used it, but I hear what folks say. You're constantly chasing that original high. That's how ride sharing starts. Most people who engage in ride sharing will tell you that first time they started driving, it was really great. And ever since that point, it never measures up. Now, am I wrong? You folks in the comments, is that what you saw when you first got in the game? You made a bunch of money in the first week. The passengers even fucking seemed nicer. Everything seemed great. I don't know how Uber does it, but that is what gets people hooked. My guess is they may even have an algorithm that sends you the best trips and things like that. But it gets people hooked. And once you're in it, shit starts, and you may have made decisions based on that first week or month or even few months of rideshare. If I'm going to be making this, I can finally go out and get that apartment, or I can upgrade my car, or I can take out a contract to get me some new furniture for the crib. And you make these decisions based on how great things are, and then it starts collapsing, and now all of a sudden you're having a hard time paying your bills. A lot of folks did that. Many of you folks may have saw the older, his video is a few years old, but it was Travis Kalanick, the former CEO before Derek Khosrowshahi, where he's riding in the back of an Uber, and the driver, this isn't political, take this shit out. The driver is going off on Travis Kalanick because he don't made a decision to purchase a car and the fares came down. So a lot of folks made long-term decisions thinking that what Uber and Lyft was paying was going to last. We had no idea that the goal was to really, really make you work for virtually nothing. Now, we know they're trying to go automate it. That's no secret. But we had no idea that all of those pay cuts were going to happen. Literally, every time they send you a contract, because you log in and it says you got to sign, you got to click yes on these new terms of service. Almost all of those are pay cuts. Every time you click yes to a new terms of service and you don't have a choice, because if you don't, you can't drive. Almost all of that stuff works against you. It's a pay cut, or it's making you do more duties, or now you got to pick up teenagers, or you got to pick up medical patients. All of those new terms of service are bad. There's virtually no change that Uber or Lyft has made, and people were like, other than telling you the destination, which I stated before, that shit should have been part of the game from day one. But there are no changes that they make that are beneficial to the driver. They're all beneficial to Uber and Lyft. And that's the way it keeps going. I had to trade my car and suffer negative equity. Wow, Cheeky Chops, I sympathize with you. I think we've all experienced that. I got negative. I mean, you putting all those miles in your car, what we do for ride sharing, it involves putting a bunch of miles in your car. There's no way to avoid negative equity. The only thing you're expecting is that the money will pay enough to offset the loss of equity. That doesn't apply no more in ride sharing. If you're driving for Uber and Lyft, in my opinion, depending on the market, but in my opinion, what you're actually doing is taking your car and trading in some of the equity for a paycheck. Let's say you got a car that's worth $20,000. You can drive $1,000 out of the car. Now the car's worth $19,000. And maybe you'll get a check for $600 or so. That's what I believe that most of us drivers are doing, particularly the full-time drivers. You're actually cashing in equity for some money. You're not making a big profit. It's not like you can lose, if your car's worth $20,000 and you drive it down to $19,000. It's not like you got the $1,000 you lost in equity plus a little bit of profit on the side. No, you probably just have the amount you lost in equity, maybe less. You're not profiting anything at all. You're losing money in a lot of markets if you drive full time. You're just trading in equity for a check. Now, if you got a car that's worth $20,000 and you drive out $1,000 in equity, in the old days you would have probably made $2 or $3 grand. So there's about $1,000 I lost in equity, plus I got a couple thousand in profit. That's how it's supposed to work. That's what it used to be like as a taxi driver. But as a Uber or Lyft driver, no, that $1,000 you lost in equity, you barely even earned that as a driver. You may have not even earned $1,000 as a driver. It is that bad. I did a video a while back, whereas I think at the time, the IRS was giving us like 53 cents a mile in credit. Now it's went up. But even at 53 cents a mile, if you drive in ride sharing, you might make between 70 and 90 cents a mile, depending on the market. Most American markets do not pay the driver $1. Right now, it's like 63 cents a mile the IRS is calculating. I think 60-some cents a mile the IRS is calculating. So even according to the IRS, who wants to take all of your damn money, you're probably only making between 10 to 20 cents a mile. Even the IRS thinks you ain't making shit. If the IRS gives you credit for, let's say, 60 cents a mile, when you do your taxes, now we know it don't cost 60 cents a mile, but let's say the IRS gives you credit for 60 cents a mile, and you're driving in a market that pays 70 cents a mile. According to the IRS, you're only making 10 cents per mile. Even the IRS thinks you ain't making shit. That's kind of the way it is. I really think that, as I say in a lot of videos, the only thing that's going to stop this, you're going to have legislation. That is the only way to stop this. They're getting away with shit to the point where I do believe they're even saying, wow, are we actually able to do this to people? I think they're even surprised that the scheme is working so well with such little resistance. But 2024 could get better for the simple fact is there is very little left to squeeze out of drivers. You got drivers right now as we speak on the road losing money with every mile. And Uber and Lyft is still trying to figure out how can we get this person to drive for even less? So I do believe, at least, and I hate to go political on this, but I've said it before, all of the legislation that's coming to benefit drivers is coming from liberal cities, liberal areas. Seattle, I believe New York just passed a minimum wage law for drivers with time off and benefits, just like Seattle. Detroit has tried it. It failed in Minnesota, but they did try it. Chicago has always tried. It's all liberal areas. What do I say in every video? You think the drivers in Boston are having some kind of special problem that they're not experiencing in Birmingham, Alabama? Drivers are getting fucked all over the country. But when you go to the areas, southern states and shit like that, they ain't doing nothing for drivers. And even the strikes, even most of the strikes are coming from more liberal areas. I don't know what else to say, but in terms of getting legislation that benefits drivers, and I do believe that's the only way we're going to have a better time with this shit, is you're going to have them pass laws. It's going to start in liberal areas. Now, if you can get a liberal federal government to finally give us a listening ear, maybe. But hate to be political, but folks on the right are not fans of having set minimum wages and forcing companies to pay you properly. They believe you leave it up to the free market. Well, Uber and Lyft is a perfect example of the free market. They've been left to their own devices. There's not a lot of regulation in ride sharing. And look at what has happened. Look at what has happened leaving it up to the free market. They got rid of the taxi companies and fucked over everybody that was remaining. That is a prime example. No government interference, very little government interference in ride sharing. And look what they've done. Is there any driver that's happy with this shit? And by the way, it's not just the drivers, the passengers are getting fucked too. If you look at what it used to be, the passengers are paying about a third of what they were paying in the taxi business. And the drivers were making probably damn near twice as much as they're making now. The drivers now make significantly less and the passengers pay significantly more. Everybody involved except the companies have gotten fucked. That's the free market in ride sharing. That is what the free market in ride sharing has done, because the government has for the most part, stood by and not got involved in it at all. They've left it solely up to Uber and Lyft to run the business, and the driver has a choice whether you want to do it or not. And look what's happening. The passengers are getting fucked, and the ones who choose to drive for the ride-sharing companies are getting fucked as well. To the point where you're starting to have both sides, passenger and driver, begging for legislation. Because if you leave it up to Uber and Lyft, they're not even telling us the truth. They're not even telling us if the driver has a felony or not. We don't know oftentimes if the passenger is the actual person or not. I picked up a hairy-ass dude named Erica on my last trip. What the fuck is that? So the free market ain't gonna work in ride sharing. It's just not. It also gives a big thumbs down to the trickle-down effect. If you treat the companies right, they'll invest more, they'll hire more people, and they'll treat the people right. That ain't worked with Uber. Nobody's fucking with Uber. There's no government regulation in most markets. They've been able to cut the driver pay and raise the fare cost, so they're making a lot more money. They're not passing any of that shit on. None of it. So the idea that if you treat companies better, they'll pass, no, Uber's a perfect example that ain't guaranteed either. There's no rate cut for passengers on the horizon. There's no driver being promised they're going to make more in the future. Nobody's benefiting except the company and its investors. I'd be happy for someone in the comments to tell me otherwise. But most of you folks are drivers, and you know this shit is happening to you too. It's your boy Tim, the handsome liberal. I do appreciate you folks tuning in.